Welcome back to Bardic Sleep Stories. As the world outside grows quiet and the shadows lengthen, we return once more to the sanctuary of the past. Take a deep, slow breath, feeling the air fill your lungs before releasing it fully. Let your shoulders drop, allow the muscles in your face to soften, and feel the weight of your body sink into the comfort of your bed. You are safe, you are still, and you are ready to travel through time. The stories we tell here are long, steady, and detailed. They are designed to occupy the wandering mind with the gentle rhythm of history, providing a path that leads away from the worries of today and toward a deep, restorative sleep. There is no pressure to follow every word or reach the end of the chronicle. Whether you drift away in 5 minutes or 50, the story will remain here, a constant and calming presence in the dark. Tonight, we immerse ourselves in a grand and sprawling narrative. We shall set aside the haste of the modern age to observe the slow turning of the wheel of power, focusing on the textures of life, the echoes of ancient stone, and the quiet legacy of those who came before us. Our journey this evening leads us into the heart of a vast and storied heritage. We begin our exhaustive exploration of the Shepherd's Watch. The year is 1348, and we find ourselves standing upon the high, rolling expanse of the English Dales. It is the golden hour, that transient and magical bridge between the labour of the day and the rest of the night. The sun, a heavy orb of molten gold, is sinking low towards the western horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows that stretch across the valley floor like fingers of darkness. The air is cooling rapidly, shedding the warmth of the afternoon and taking on the crisp, clean scent of dew-soaked grass and damp earth. On the side of the limestone ridge, a sea of white wool moves with a slow, fluid, collective intelligence. This is the flock, 1,000 strong, their coats thick and heavy, glowing softly in the dying light. The man who commands this gentle army stands at the crest of the hill, leaning heavily on a staff of polished ash wood. He is a figure carved from the landscape itself, weathered and enduring. His name has been forgotten by the history books, but his presence is the anchor of the hills. He wears a tunic of coarse, undyed wool that smells of lanolin and wood smoke, and a heavy hooded cloak that falls to his knees, designed to turn the wind and the rain. He brings 2 fingers to his mouth and produces a sharp, rising whistle, a command that cuts through the silence of the twilight. At his heel, a black and white dog, alert and intelligent, springs into action. The dog runs in a wide arc, a blur of motion against the green turf, gathering the stragglers from the edges of the heather. The sheep respond instantly, their low bleating filling the air as they turn and begin the slow descent toward the night pasture. They are heading for the sheepfold, a permanent structure built into the hollow of the valley. The fold is a masterpiece of dry stone engineering, a circular enclosure built from the grey limestone of the Dales, stacked without mortar by generations of shepherds who came before. The walls are high and thick, covered in patches of yellow lichen and soft green moss, standing as a fortress against the wolves that still roam the deep woods at the edge of the parish. As the flock pours through the narrow wooden gate, the sound is like a rushing river of hooves, a rhythmic, drumming vibration that can be felt in the soles of the feet. The shepherd stands by the gate, his eyes scanning every animal that passes. He is counting them, not by numbers, but by the ancient rhythmic score of the Dales: yan, tan, tethera, methera, checking for limps, for sickness, or for the missing. It is a ritual of accounting that marks the end of the grazing day and the beginning of the long watch. Once the last ewe has crossed the threshold, and the heavy wooden hurdle has been dragged across the opening and tied fast with a rope of twisted hemp, the shepherd turns his attention to his own shelter. He does not return to the village, which lies 3 miles down the valley, a cluster of thatched roofs from which thin pillars of smoke are already rising. His place is here, on the boundary between the wild and the tame. His home for the night is a shepherd's hut, a small, box-like structure mounted on two large wooden wheels with iron rims. It is parked on a flat area of turf near the fold, positioned so the door faces away from the prevailing wind. He climbs the 3 wooden steps and unlatches the door. The interior is cramped but intensely cozy, a capsule of safety in the vastness of the darkening landscape. It smells of dried herbs, old leather, and the sweet scent of the straw mattress that fills a bunk on one side. A small iron stove sits in the corner, though tonight he will build his fire outside. He sets down his satchel, a worn leather bag containing the necessities of his trade. He takes out his tar box, a horn container filled with a mixture of pine tar and grease, used to treat cuts or infections on the sheep. He checks his sling, a strip of leather used to deter predators, and hangs it on a peg. He places a loaf of dense, dark rye bread and a wedge of hard cheese on the small wooden shelf that serves as a table. These objects, the staff, the box, the bread, are simple, but they are imbued with a profound dignity. They are the tools of a vocation that is as old as civilization itself. He runs his hand over the smooth wood of the doorframe, feeling the grain that has been polished by his own touch over 1,000 nights. He is the king of this small wooden castle, the guardian of the valley, preparing to hold the line against the dark. The light has now drained almost entirely from the sky, leaving a deep bruised indigo that hangs heavy over the hills. The temperature continues to drop, a creeping chill that seeks to penetrate the layers of wool. It is time for the fire. The shepherd steps back down to the grass, gathering an armful of dry heather stems and dead gorse that he collected earlier in the day. He arranges them in a small, stone-lined pit near the entrance of the hut, building a pyramid of kindling with the care of an architect. From a pouch at his belt he produces his fire-making kit, a piece of flint, a knuckle-shaped steel striker, and a small tin of charred linen tinder. He holds the flint close to the tinder and strikes it with the steel. Click, click. A shower of bright orange sparks cascades down. One of them, a tiny, glowing seed of heat, catches in the weave of the black linen. He blows on it gently, a long, steady stream of breath that encourages the ember to spread. The red glow expands, consuming the cloth. He transfers it to a bundle of dried grass and blows again. Smoke, thick and aromatic, begins to curl up into the night air. Suddenly, with a soft whoosh, the grass bursts into flame. He feeds the fire slowly, adding the heather stems, then the thicker branches of hawthorn. The fire takes hold, casting a warm, flickering circle of orange light that pushes back the shadows. The crackle of the burning wood is a comforting sound, a sharp counterpoint to the silence of the hills. He warms his hands over the flames, rubbing them together to drive the stiffness from his joints. The fire is more than just heat. It is a companion. It is a living thing that requires attention and care, a bright, dancing spirit that anchors him in the vast, empty theater of the night. With the fire established and burning steadily, the shepherd settles onto a large, flat stone that serves as his watch seat. He wraps his heavy cloak tighter around his shoulders, pulling the hood up to shield his face from the side wind. The dog lies at his feet, resting its chin on its paws, its eyes half closed but its ears twitching at every rustle in the grass. The world has now fully turned to night. The landscape, so green and detailed only an hour ago, has been reduced to a series of grey and black shapes, a monochrome drawing in charcoal. But as the earth fades, the sky awakens. The clouds that skirted the horizon earlier have dissolved, revealing a dome of absolute clarity. The stars begin to appear, not all at once, but one by one, like lamps being lit in a distant palace. First comes the evening star, bright and steady in the west. Then the Great Bear, the plough, hanging directly overhead, a giant question mark of light. Then the Pleiades, a tight cluster of diamond dust shimmering faintly. To the shepherd, these are not just lights, they are a clock, and a compass. He knows their names, names that were given by the ancients. Arcturus, Sirius, Aldebaran. He watches the slow, majestic rotation of the heavens, a celestial mechanism of infinite precision. The Milky Way stretches across the zenith, a river of spilt milk, a dense band of light that speaks of the incomprehensible vastness of creation. The silence is profound. It is filled with the subtle breathing of the earth, the rustle of the wind in the dry bracken, the hoot of a tawny owl from the oak wood, the occasional shifting of a sheep in the fold, the soft clink of a hoof against stone. He sits motionless, a part of the landscape, breathing in the cold, pure air, beginning the long, silent vigil that will last until the dawn. The fire has now settled into a bed of glowing embers, pulsing with a deep, radiant heat that warms the shepherd's shins through his leggings. It is time for the evening meal, a ritual as simple and unadorned as the hills themselves. He reaches into his leather satchel and withdraws the loaf of rye bread. It is heavy and dense, baked by the village baker 3 days ago, with a thick, dark crust that requires a strong hand to break. He takes his knife, a sturdy blade with a handle of polished antler, and slices a wedge from the loaf. The crumb is tight and moist, smelling faintly of sour yeast and the stone oven. Next comes the cheese, a hard, pale block wrapped in a piece of linen. It is an old cheese, made from the milk of his own flock in the spring. Aged until it is sharp and crumbly, he cuts a piece, the knife passing through the firm texture with a satisfying resistance. He eats slowly, savoring every mouthful. There is no hurry here, no table to be cleared, no conversation to be made. He chews the coarse bread and the salty cheese, the flavors mingling on his tongue, the taste of the earth, the grain, and the grass. He reaches for his costrol, a leather flask bottle filled with small beer, a weak fermented drink that is safer than the water from the stream. He uncorks it and takes a long draught. The cool liquid washes down the dry crumbs, refreshing his throat. As he eats, he stares into the heart of the fire, watching the shapes changing in the coals, gold, red, and black. He throws a few crumbs to the dog, who catches them in mid-air with a snap of its jaws, then resumes its vigil. This simple meal, taken under the vast canopy of the stars, feels like a feast. It is fuel for the long watch, a physical connection to the labor that produced it. He brushes the crumbs from his lap, wipes his knife on his breeches, and slides it back into its sheath with a soft click, the meal concluded in the quiet dignity of the wild. With his hunger satisfied, the shepherd leans back against the rough wooden wheel of the hut, closing his eyes for a moment to shift his senses. In the absence of sight, his hearing expands, becoming acute and sensitive to the microscopic details of the night. The soundscape of the dales is not silent. It is a complex symphony of subtle noises. The most dominant sound is the wind. It is a constant presence, flowing over the ridges and down into the valley like an invisible river. Tonight, it is a gentle breeze, whispering through the dry limestone walls of the sheepfold, with a low, mournful tone. It rattles the dry stems of the bracken, hiss, rustle, hiss, and sighs through the needles of the solitary pine tree that stands on the skyline. Beneath the wind, there is the sound of the flock. 1,000 sheep do not sleep in total silence. There is the soft, rhythmic sound of cud chewing, a grinding murmur that signifies contentment and digestion. Occasionally, a ewe will cough, a dry, hacking sound that echoes briefly before being swallowed by the dark. A lamb might bleat in its sleep, a high, wavering note of dreaming. He can hear the shifting of bodies, the soft thud of a hoof stamping the ground, the friction of wool rubbing against stone. Further out, beyond the safety of the fold, lies the wilder world. He hears the screech of a barn owl hunting in the lower meadows, a terrifying, spectral shriek that freezes the blood of the field mice. He hears the bark of a fox, sharp and staccato miles away on the opposite ridge. His dog's ears swivel like radar dishes, tracking these sounds, filtering the harmless from the threatening. The shepherd reads this audio map with the ease of a scholar reading a book, knowing that every snap of a twig or hush in the wind tells a story of what is moving in the dark, keeping his mind alert while his body rests. To pass the slow, heavy hours of the middle watch, the shepherd turns to a pastime that keeps his hands busy and his mind focused. He reaches into a deep pocket of his tunic and pulls out a piece of wood he found earlier in the week. It is a small block of holly, pale and dense, with a fine, tight grain. He opens his knife again. He is carving a toggle for his cloak, a simple, practical object that will replace a button he lost during the shearing. He begins to whittle, peeling away long, thin curls of wood that fall around his boots like pale ribbons. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. The sound of the steel blade shaving the wood is rhythmic and soothing. He works by the light of the fire and the moon, turning the object over and over in his calloused fingers, feeling for the shape hidden inside the block. He smooths the edges, rounding the ends until they are perfectly symmetrical. This is not high art, but it is a craft born of necessity and patience. The shepherds of the Dales are famous for their carving. Their knitting sheaths, spoons, and bowls are found in every cottage in the valley. As he works, his mind drifts, not into anxiety, but into a state of flowing contemplation. He thinks about the seasons to come, the repair of the wall, the price of wool at the autumn fair. He feels the texture of the hollywood, cool and smooth, warming slowly in his hand. The firelight dances on the blade of the knife, flashing silver and orange. He blows the dust from the carving, inspecting his progress with a critical eye. It is nearly done. He cuts a groove around the center for the cord to grip. This small act of creation is a defiance of the empty time, a way of imposing his will on the raw materials of the world, transforming a piece of fallen branch into a tool that will serve him through the winter storms. The night deepens, moving past the midnight hour into the dead of night. The temperature has dropped significantly now, the air biting with a sharp, frosty edge that nips at the nose and ears. The dew that settled on the grass earlier is turning to ice, glittering like scattered diamonds in the moonlight. The shepherd pulls his cloak tighter, wrapping himself in the heavy wool like a chrysalis. He looks up at the sky. The great constellation of the plough has rotated around the North Star, marking the passage of time more accurately than any mechanical clock. The sky is a deep, velvety black, awash with more stars than the human mind can comprehend. He feels a profound sense of solitude, but not loneliness. In the medieval mind, the night sky is the roof of the cathedral of creation. He is merely a small speck on the hillside, yet he feels connected to the vast wheeling machinery of the universe. He wonders, as shepherds have wondered for thousands of years, about the nature of those lights. Are they distant campfires of the angels? Are they windows into heaven? The silence is absolute now. Even the wind has held its breath. The sheep have settled into a deep sleep. The chewing has stopped, and the fold is a pool of stillness. He feels the weight of the responsibility. He is the only conscious soul in the valley, the sole witness to this majestic, freezing beauty. He reaches out and strokes the head of the dog, who is curled in a tight ball of warmth against his leg. The contact grounds him. He is suspended in a moment of pure existence, stripped of all social rank and worldly worry, simply a man keeping watch under the eternal, indifferent gaze of the galaxy. The stillness is broken by a sudden instinct, a need to move and circulate the blood. The shepherd stands up, his joints popping audibly in the quiet air. He stretches his arms toward the sky, groaning softly, then picks up his staff. It is time to walk the bounds. He signals the dog with a low hand gesture, and together they leave the warmth of the fire. The cold hits him instantly, bracing and shocking. He walks slowly around the perimeter of the sheepfold, The dry stone wall is cold to the touch, the stones radiating the chill of the earth. He runs his hand along the top coping stones, checking for loose rocks or gaps where a determined fox might scramble over. He peers over the wall into the huddle of the flock. They are a grey mass in the darkness, a sea of woolly backs packed tight for warmth. He can smell them, a rich, oily scent of fleece and animal heat that rises from the enclosure like steam. He walks to the wooden gate, testing the knot of the rope. It holds fast. He turns his back to the fold and looks out into the darkness of the open moor. His eyes scan the horizon, looking for the telltale green glow of wolf eyes or the movement of shadows that do not belong to the wind. Nothing. The valley is empty. The threat is always there, lurking in the imagination and the deep woods. But tonight, the defenses hold. He completes the circuit, his boots crunching on the frosting grass, leaving dark footprints in the silver dew. He returns to the circle of firelight, which now feels like a homecoming. He throws a fresh log onto the embers, a piece of seasoned oak that catches slowly and settles back onto his stone. The patrol finished, the perimeter secure, ready to face the long, slow slide toward the morning. While the shepherd rests his body against the wheel, his companion remains vigilant. The dog, curled at his feet, is an animal of singular purpose and breeding. He is not the groomed pet of a parlor, but a working beast, lean and wiry, with a coat of rough, weather-resistant fur that is matted with the burrs of the high moor. In the 14th century, these dogs are simply known as shepherd's curs or band dogs, the ancestors of the modern collies. He is a creature of instinct and intelligence, bred over centuries to understand the complex language of whistles and hand signals. Even in sleep, the dog is not fully unconscious. His ears, one slightly torn from a skirmish with a bramble bush, rotate independently, tracking the microscopic movements of the night. He smells the wind, analyzing the scent of a badger passing a mile downwind, dismissing it as a non-threat. To the shepherd, this dog is more valuable than any tool in his satchel. A good dog does the work of 3 men. He is the eyes that see in the dark and the legs that never tire. There is a deep, unspoken bond between them, a partnership forged in the silence of the hills. They share the same food, the same cold, and the same solitude. The shepherd reaches down and rests his hand on the dog's flank, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of the animal's breathing. It is a warm, living anchor in the freezing night. The dog opens one eye, revealing a flash of amber intelligence, acknowledges the touch with a subtle thump of his tail against the ground, and then returns to his watch. This mutual reliance is the cornerstone of their survival. Without the dog, the flock is unmanageable chaos. Without the shepherd, the dog has no purpose. They are 2 halves of a single organism designed to impose order on the wild landscape. The focus of their combined vigilance, the flock within the stone walls, has settled into a deep, collective slumber. These are not the white, fluffy sheep of a nursery rhyme. They are a hardy mountain breed, perhaps the ancestors of the Herdwicks or the Swaldales, evolved to survive on the thin grass and the biting winds of the uplands. Their fleece is not pure white, but a mix of grey, brown, and cream, a natural camouflage against the limestone rocks. The wool is thick and coarse, saturated with lanolin, a natural grease that makes the fleece waterproof. If you were to touch them now, your hand would come away coated in this waxy substance, smelling of musk and oil. This flock represents a staggering amount of wealth. In this era, the wool trade is the engine of the kingdom's economy, the golden fleece that builds cathedrals and funds wars. Each animal in the fold is a walking unit of currency. The shepherd knows the lineage of the ewes, the temperament of the rams, and the history of every lamb. He listens to their breathing, a soft, multitudinous susurration that rises from the enclosure like a mist. Occasionally a dispute arises, a shove for space, A butt of heads, followed by the clattering of hooves on stone, but it settles quickly. They are safe. The stone walls, built by the hands of men who have been dust for 200 years, hold them in a warm embrace. The heat generated by their bodies creates a microclimate within the fold, keeping the frost at bay. The shepherd watches the steam rising from their backs in the moonlight, a ghostly vapor that testifies to the life and warmth contained within the cold stones. He feels a fierce protectiveness over them, a duty that transcends mere employment. He is the father of the flock, and tonight they are his sleeping children. To keep his mind sharp and his fingers supple in the biting cold, the shepherd turns to another task, one that is inextricably linked to his profession. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a bundle of grey wool yarn and a set of wooden needles. Knitting is not a feminine domestic art in this time and place. It is a vital industry of the dalesman. He tucks a knitting stick, a carved wooden sheath, into his belt to hold the working needle steady against his hip. This allows him to knit with one hand while leaving the other free to hold his staff or check the fire. His fingers move with a blinding, practiced speed, the needles clicking softly like the ticking of a clock. Click, loop, pull. Click, loop, pull. He is making a cap, a dense felted hat that will be waterproof and warm. He does not need to look at his hands. The muscle memory is absolute. He knits by the feel of the yarn sliding through his fingers, counting the stitches in his head. This rhythm is hypnotic, a meditation in wool. It occupies the surface level of his mind, preventing the boredom that leads to sleep, while leaving his deeper senses free to watch the horizon. The yarn he uses is bump yarn, spun from the wool of his own sheep, retaining the natural oils. As he works, the hat grows in a spiral, row by row, a physical manifestation of the passing time. It is said that a good shepherd can knit a pair of socks in a single watch. This industry adds another layer of value to his time. He is guarding wealth while simultaneously creating it. The firelight flickers on the needles, casting dancing shadows on the grass. The work is soothing, a repetitive cycle of creation that creates a sense of domestic order in the wild, untamed theater of the night. As the constellation of Orion begins to climb higher in the eastern sky, signaling the approach of the third watch, the shepherd faces his greatest enemy, not the wolf, but the weight of sleep. The silence of the hills becomes heavy, pressing down on his eyelids with a physical force. The fire has burned down to a bed of sullen red coals, offering less light and less stimulation. The cold seems to intensify, seeping through the layers of his cloak to numb his extremities. His head nods forward, his chin touching his chest, and for a second, he drifts into the grey borderland of the hypnagogic state. In this twilight of the mind, the gorse bushes transform into crouching goblins, and the sound of the wind becomes a whispering voice. He jerks his head up, shaking himself awake with a grunt of annoyance. To sleep on watch is the ultimate sin. It is to abandon the trust of the flock and to leave the door open to disaster. He stands up, stamping his feet hard on the frozen ground to force the blood back into his toes. He reaches for his water skin and splashes a handful of freezing liquid onto his face. The shock is instant and painful, a sharp slap of reality that clears the fog from his brain. He paces back and forth in front of the hut, his breath pluming in white clouds before him. He recites a psalm under his breath, the Latin words tumbling out in a rhythmic chant, using the structure of the language to anchor his mind. He checks the sheep again, peering over the wall. They are still there, safe and sound. He adds a few precious sticks to the fire, blowing on the embers until a small flame licks up, a beacon of wakefulness. The battle against fatigue is a private, silent war, fought every night in the loneliness of the hills, a test of endurance that defines the shepherd's character. We arrive now at the wolf hour, that deepest, darkest trench of the night that lies between 3 and 4 in the morning. The moon has dipped below the western ridge, plunging the valley into a profound, heavy darkness. The stars are the only source of illumination, cold and distant pinpricks of ice. The temperature has reached its nadir. The frost is no longer just a surface dusting. It has bitten deep into the ground, freezing the mud into iron-hard ridges. The air is so still that it feels solid, as if the world has been encased in glass. This is the time when the life force of the world seems to be at its lowest ebb. The fire is a small, desperate island of heat in an ocean of cold. The shepherd huddles closer to the embers, wrapping his arms around his knees to conserve every calorie. He stops knitting, he stops whittling, he simply endures. He listens to the silence, which is now absolute. Even the owl has ceased its hunting. The sheep are motionless clumps of shadow. This is the time when the veil between the worlds feels thinnest, when the ancient superstitions of the Dales seem most plausible. He avoids looking at the dark tree line of the forest, keeping his eyes fixed on the fire. He thinks of the warm bed in the village, the softness of a pillow, but pushes the thought away. He is the watchman. He is the stone that does not sleep. He reaches out to touch the cold iron rim of the hut's wheel, grounding himself in the reality of the metal. He watches the eastern horizon with a hungry intensity, searching for the faintest graying of the black, the first subtle promise that the sun has not abandoned the world. It is a waiting game of immense patience. Sitting in the heart of the freeze, holding the line until the turning of the earth brings the mercy of the dawn. There is a supple, almost imperceptible shift in the texture of the darkness that signals the end of the deep night. It is not yet light, but the absolute crushing blackness of the wolf hour begins to dilute, turning into a deep, bruised charcoal. This is the false dawn, a faint, ghostly cone of zodiacal light that rises from the eastern horizon like a celestial pyramid. The air undergoes a chemical change. The stillness, which had been heavy and stagnant, is broken by a sudden shivering breeze that sweeps down from the high peaks. It is the coldest wind of the night, known to the hill folk as the dawn wind, a final biting exhale from the retreating shadows. It rattles the stiff frosted grass, click, 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 and sings a high, thin note through the gaps in the stone wall. The shepherd feels it against his cheek, sharp as a razor, but he welcomes it. It is the herald of the morning. He stands up, his joints stiff and aching from the long immobility, and stamps his feet on the iron-hard ground. The sound echoes loudly in the quiet valley. He looks to the east. The horizon is no longer a seamless merge of earth and sky. A hard, dark line has appeared, separating the silhouette of the ridge from the lightening grey of the heavens. The stars, which had burnt with such fierce brilliance, begin to retreat. The smaller, fainter stars are the first to vanish, wiped away by the encroaching greyness, leaving only the brightest navigational beacons to hold the sky. The frost on the ground is at its thickest now, a heavy white rime that coats the world in a fragile armor of ice. The shepherd pulls off his woolen mitts and blows into his cupped hands, the warm breath billowing out in a cloud of steam that is instantly snatched away by the wind. He is a statue of endurance, his eyes fixed on that thin, promising line of the horizon, waiting for the first true bleed of color that will officially break the siege of the night. As the grey light strengthens, filtering down into the bowl of the valley, the biological alarm clock of the flock begins to ring. For hours, the sheepfold has been a silent mass of sleeping wool, but now a ripple of movement passes through the herd. It starts with a single ewe standing up, her knees cracking, shaking the frost from her heavy fleece with a sound like a wet rug being beaten. Flap, flap, flap. Then another rises, and another. The sound of 1,000 animals waking up is a complex, rising crescendo. There are low, guttural coughs as lungs clear themselves of the cold night air. There are sneezes, the stamping of hooves, and the rustle of bodies pressing against each other. The heat that was trapped within the huddle begins to dissipate, rising in a visible column of steam that mingles with the morning mist. The dog, too, shakes off the lethargy of the watch, He stands, stretching his front legs forward in a deep bow, yawning wide to reveal a pink tongue and white teeth, then shakes his entire body from nose to tail, the vibrations traveling down his spine. He looks up at the shepherd, his tail wagging a slow, rhythmic greeting. The partnership is renewed for another day. The shepherd walks to the wall and looks over. The sea of greybacks is churning now, a restless tide of wool. They are hungry. Their stomachs are empty after the long night, and they know, with an instinctual certainty, that the light means grass. The shepherd speaks to them, a low, murmuring nonsense talk that they know well. Steady now, steady. The sun is coming. His voice is rough with disuse, rasping in the cold air. This moment of awakening is less about the visual and more about the audible. The world is shaking off the paralysis of the freeze. The blood is beginning to pump, and the silent, frozen landscape is transforming back into a living, breathing entity. The transition from night to day enters its most beautiful phase, the blue hour. The sun is not yet visible, but its light is refracting through the atmosphere, bathing the dales in a wash of cool, ethereal indigo. The monochrome world suddenly regains its depth and dimension. The hills are no longer flat cutouts, but reveal their rolling contours, the deep creases of the ravines, and the texture of the heather. The mist that has formed in the valley floor during the night becomes visible, a thick, white river of fog that clings to the stream, glowing softly in the pre-dawn light. It looks like a second ocean, silent and ghostly, with the tops of the oak trees poking through like islands. The shepherd extinguishes his fire. He kicks the remaining embers apart, scattering the red coals onto the damp earth where they hiss and die, releasing a final plume of acrid wood smoke. He no longer needs the artificial heat. The promise of the real fire is imminent. He picks up his satchel and packs away his knitting, his knife, and his water skin. He tidies the small camp, leaving no trace of his vigil save for the circle of scorched earth. He is preparing to move. The birds have started their morning liturgy. It begins with the skylark, rising high above the moor, pouring out a cascading liquid song that rains down on the valley. Then the meadow pipit joins in, and the robin from the hedgerow. It is a chaotic, joyful affirmation of life. The color begins to bleed back into the world. The green of the grass, the purple of the heather, the grey of the limestone. The shepherd leans on his staff, his face turned to the east, watching the sky shift from blue to violet, then to a pale, translucent rose. The cold is still fierce, perhaps even sharper than before, but the psychological weight of the darkness has lifted. The world has survived the turning of the wheel. Then the moment arrives. On the very edge of the eastern ridge, a single point of blinding molten gold ignites. It is the rim of the sun. The light hits the top of the western hills first, painting the peaks in a brilliant fiery orange, while the valley floor remains in shadow. The line of light moves down the hillside with visible speed, a curtain of warmth descending into the world. The shepherd closes his eyes and lets the first rays strike his face. The sensation is primitive and overwhelming. It is not just light, it is physical energy. He can feel the heat soaking into his cold skin, penetrating the wool of his hood, thawing the frozen marrow of his bones. He takes a deep breath, inhaling the light. The frost on the grass begins to sparkle with a diamond intensity, then instantly begins to melt, turning into jewels of water. The mist in the valley begins to swirl and evaporate, burned away by the rising power. The shadows stretch out long and thin behind him, reaching toward the west as if trying to flee the day. The sheep turn their heads toward the sun, blinking in the sudden brilliance. For the shepherd, this is the victory. He has stood his ground against the void. He has kept the watch, he has protected the flock, and he has delivered them safely to the morning. The anxiety of the dark vanishes, evaporated like the dew. A profound sense of peace and accomplishment settles over him. He opens his eyes. The sun is fully clear of the horizon now, a perfect, blinding disk. The sky is a pale, washed-out blue. The day has officially begun. The night is a memory, a dream of cold and dark that has been swept away by the undeniable golden reality of the sun. With the sun climbing steadily into the sky, the time for contemplation is over. The time for work has returned. The shepherd walks to the wooden gate of the fold, his boots squelching in the softening mud. He unties the heavy hemp rope, his fingers fumbling slightly with the stiff fibers. He drags the hurdle aside, the wood scraping loudly against the stone threshold. He steps back and gives a sharp whistle. The response is immediate. The flock pours out of the narrow opening like water bursting from a dam. They jostle and push, bleating loudly, their hooves drumming a thunderous rhythm on the turf. They fan out across the hillside, heads down, immediately tearing at the grass with a frantic, hungry energy. The sound of tearing vegetation, rip, chew, fills the air. The dog is instantly at work, flanking the herd, keeping them from scattering too widely, guiding them toward the sweet grass of the upper pasture. The shepherd shoulders his satchel and grips his staff. He takes one last look at the campsite, the cold ashes of his fire, and the small wooden hut that sheltered his supplies. He turns his back on the fold and begins to walk up the hill, following his flock. His shift is not over. It never truly ends. But the nature of the duty has changed. He is no longer the static guardian of the dark, but the mobile steward of the day. The sun warms his back, the wind is fresh and sweet, and the valley is alive with the business of grazing. He walks with a long, steady stride, a small, solitary figure moving through the vast, green, sun-drenched landscape, disappearing slowly over the ridge as the cycle of the dales continues its eternal rhythmic turning. As the morning matures, the shepherd and his flock ascend higher into the uplands, moving away from the lush, enclosed valley floor toward the open, wind-scoured expanse of the high moor. The landscape here changes character entirely. The soft green turf gives way to a rugged mosaic of coarse grasses, purple heather, and patches of resilient bilberry. This is the hef, the specific patch of hillside to which this flock is genetically tethered. These sheep are heafed, meaning they have an instinctual knowledge of their own boundary, taught by mother to lamb over generations, requiring no fences to keep them in place. The shepherd walks with a slow, rhythmic gait that eats up the miles without effort, a stride perfected by a lifetime of traversing uneven ground. The air up here is thin and incredibly pure, tasting of ozone and wet granite. The silence of the night has been replaced by the vast, hollow sound of the wind moving over open space, a low, rushing roar that sounds like the ocean. He stops occasionally to lean on his staff, looking out over the tapestry of the county laid out below him. He sees the distant patchwork of the village fields, the thin ribbon of the road, and the smoke of the chimneys, all looking like a toy village from a child's game. He is separated from the world of men by height and silence. Up here, the concerns of the village, the petty squabbles, the debts, the gossip, evaporate into insignificance. There is only the sky, the rock, and the sheep. The dog runs ahead, flushing a grouse from the heather with a chaotic whir of wings, then stops to look back, tongue lolling, waiting for a command. The shepherd signals him to the left with a sharp whistle, guiding the flock away from a patch of treacherous bog. It is a dance of three partners, man, dog, and sheep, moving in perfect synchronization across the roof of the world. To the untrained eye, the moorland might appear to be a monotonous wilderness of brown and green, but to the shepherd, it is a complex library of botanical information. As he walks, his eyes are constantly scanning the ground, reading the vegetation with the fluency of a scholar reading a manuscript. He knows that the presence of the delicate yellow tormental flower indicates acidic soil where the grazing will be poor. He looks for the bright green star-shaped leaves of the shepherd's purse, a plant he gathers to make a poultice for bruises. He spots a patch of sphagnum moss, lush and sponge-like, which he knows can be dried and used to dress wounds or line his boots for warmth. This knowledge is not academic, it is visceral and practical, passed down through the oral tradition of his ancestors. He also reads the sky. He notes the shape of the clouds piling up in the west, mare's tails that signal high wind within 12 hours. He watches the flight of the swallows. If they fly low, skimming the heather, rain is coming. He is a walking meteorological station, predicting the weather not with instruments, but with the sensitivity of his own skin and the observation of the natural world. He stops to examine a patch of sheep sorrel, tasting a leaf. It is sharp and acidic, a burst of vitamin C in a diet of bread and cheese. He checks the water in the beck, the small mountain stream that cuts through the limestone. He knows which springs run clear in summer and which turn muddy in the rain. He is completely embedded in his environment, a part of the ecosystem rather than an intruder. The land speaks to him in 1,000 quiet voices, and he listens to every whisper, adjusting his path and his plans in a continuous silent dialogue with the earth. While the shepherd lives a life of solitude, the animals he guards are the beating heart of a vast international economic engine. As the sheep graze, tearing at the tough fescue grass, they are growing the golden fleece that powers the medieval world. This wool is not merely clothing, it is currency. The shepherd pauses to examine a ewe, parting her fleece with his hands. The wool is creamy white near the skin, darkening to grey at the tips where the weather has touched it. It is dense, crimped, and incredibly soft. This is the staple, the fiber that will eventually be shorn, washed, packed into enormous sacks, and transported by packhorse trains across the hills to the great wool markets. From there, it might travel to the weaving towns of Flanders or the dyeing vats of Florence, to be turned into the finest scarlet cloth for a cardinal or a velvet cloak for a king. The shepherd is the base of this pyramid. He will likely never see the ocean, never see a city, and never wear the fine cloth his chargers produce. He wears the rough russet and the felted hat. Yet without his vigilance on this lonely hill, the trade would collapse. He is connected by an invisible thread of wool to the stone cathedrals rising in the cities, funded by the profits of the trade. He runs his hand over the sheep's back, feeling the warmth and the grease. He knows the value of what he guards. It gives his lonely vigil a sense of quiet nobility. He is not just watching animals. He is guarding the treasury of the kingdom, protecting the delicate biological machinery that turns the rain and the grass of the dales into the gold of commerce. The maintenance of the landscape is as much a part of the shepherd's duty as the care of the flock. He comes upon a section of the dry stone wall that marks the boundary of the summer pasture. The winter frost has been unkind here. A section of the wall has belled out and collapsed, spilling a pile of grey limestone rocks onto the turf. This is a breach that must be fixed before the flock finds it. The shepherd lays down his staff and sets to work. This is a task of patience. There is no mortar to glue these stones together. The wall stands solely through the forces of gravity and friction. He dismantles the loose section, laying the stones out on the grass. He begins to rebuild, selecting each stone with care, turning it in his hands to find its face and its balance. Clack, scrape, thud. He lays the broad foundation stones first, then the smaller filling stones in the center, and then the face stones. At regular intervals, he places a through stone, a long rock that spans the entire width of the wall, tying the two faces together. It is a three-dimensional puzzle. He works slowly, enjoying the rough texture of the limestone and the satisfying sound of the rock settling into its eternal place. He is repairing the work of his grandfather, adding his own labor to the collective effort of the centuries. When the gap is filled, he places the camstones, the heavy, upright coping stones, along the top to lock the structure together. He gives the wall a firm push. It does not move. It is solid. a testament to his skill. He wipes the stone dust from his hands, feeling a deep satisfaction in the restoration of order. The wall is whole again, a grey ribbon of stone stretching unbroken. The sun has now reached its zenith, hanging directly overhead in a sky of piercing blue. The shadows have retreated to nothing, huddled directly beneath the objects that cast them. The heat on the high moor is substantial, shimmering in waves above the heather. It is the time for nooning, the midday rest. The sheep have stopped grazing and have sought out the shelter of a limestone outcrop or a hollow in the ground, lying down to chew the cud in a collective siesta. The shepherd finds his own sanctuary, a small grassy depression shielded from the wind by a large boulder. The rock, warmed by the morning sun, radiates a gentle heat against his back. He sits down with a sigh of relief, stretching his tired legs out on the turf. The dog collapses beside him with a dramatic flop, instantly asleep. The shepherd pulls his hat down over his eyes to shade them from the glare. The world is incredibly quiet at noon, a hushed suspension of activity. The only sounds are the buzzing of a bumblebee moving among the clover and the distant warbling cry of a curlew. He does not sleep deeply as he did in the hut, but drifts into a light dozing state. Hovering on the edge of consciousness, he feels the sun soaking into his tunic, the smell of the crushed thyme beneath him, and the solid, unmoving earth supporting his weight. It is a moment of perfect equilibrium. The work of the morning is done, the work of the afternoon has not yet begun. He exists in the golden pause of the midday, a solitary king on his throne of grass, letting the peace of the high hills seep into his bones and wash away the fatigue of the long night watch. The passing of the midday hour is marked not by a bell, but by the subtle shifting of the light. The sun slips past its zenith, beginning the long, slow arc towards the west, and the shadows, which had huddled beneath the rocks, begin to stretch out once more, leaning towards the east. The shepherd rouses himself from his rest, the dog instantly snapping to attention at the change in his breathing rhythm. The heat of the afternoon has dried the dew completely, and the air is now dry and dusty, smelling of pollen and hot stone. A collective thirst begins to ripple through the flock. The sheep stop grazing and lift their heads, bleating with a dry, rasping tone. The shepherd knows the geography of hydration on this mountain as well as he knows the lines on his own palm. He whistles a command, a sweeping gesture with his arm, and the dog begins to flank the herd, gently nudging them away from the dry heather and towards the tarn. This is a small glacial lake hidden in a fold of the hills, a relic of the Ice Age. As they crest the rise, the water comes into view, a sheet of polished obsidian, dark and still, reflecting the blue sky and the passing clouds with mirror-perfect clarity. The sheep smell the water before they reach it, their pace quickening into a trot. They crowd the bank, a wall of wool pressing against the reeds. The sound of their drinking is a loud, rhythmic lap, 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 multiplied by 100 tongues. The shepherd stands back, watching them. He takes his own cup, a carved wooden quiche, and dips it into the inflow stream where the water runs clear over quartz pebbles. The water is shockingly cold, tasting of minerals and deep earth, a liquid shock that revitalizes the spirit in the heat of the afternoon. While the flock drinks, the shepherd's eyes are never still. He scans the edges of the tarn, where the ground turns boggy and treacherous. He spots a patch of white wool that is not moving with the rest of the herd. It is a lamb, a late-born creature from the spring, which has ventured too far into a cluster of dense gorse bushes and become entangled. The thorns have caught in its fleece, and in its panic to escape, it has only wound itself tighter. The shepherd approaches slowly, making a low, shushing sound to calm the animal. He does not rush. Sudden movements would only cause the lamb to thrash and tear its skin. He reaches the bush and assesses the tangle. He uses the hook of his staff, the iconic crook, not to grab the lamb, are to gently pull back the thorny branches, pinning them against the ground to create a path. He reaches in with his hands. The wool is soft and warm, vibrating with the lamb's rapid heartbeat. He finds the bramble that is the culprit and uses his knife to slice through the tough stem with a single clean cut. The tension releases instantly. He lifts the lamb free, holding it for a moment against his chest to check for injuries. The animal smells of milk and sweet grass. Finding no blood, he sets it down on the turf. The lamb shakes itself vigorously, bleats once in indignation, and scampers back to the safety of its mother, who is waiting by the water's edge with an expression of mild concern. It is a small drama, played out in silence, but it illustrates the core of the shepherd's contract. He is the liberator of the trapped, the hands that undo the knots of the wild, ensuring that not a single life is lost to the indifference of the landscape. With the flock watered and settling back into a rhythm of grazing, the afternoon stretches out into a long, golden expanse of waiting. To fill the silence of the high moor, the shepherd reaches into his tunic and pulls out a slender instrument made from the hollow bone of a swan's wing, polished to the color of old ivory by years of handling. It is a pipe, a simple flute with 5 holes drilled along its length. He sits on a hummock of moss, crosses his legs, and raises the pipe to his lips. He blows gently, his fingers dancing over the holes. The sound that emerges is high, clear, and haunting, a thin ribbon of melody that weaves itself into the wind. He does not play a structured tune of the court or the tavern. He plays the music of the hill. It is a wandering, improvisational melody that mimics the rise and fall of the landscape, the call of the curlew, and the sigh of the breeze in the grass. The sheep do not look up. They are accustomed to this sound. It is the soundtrack of their lives, a signal that the shepherd is present and all is well. The music carries for miles in the thin air, a lonely, beautiful assertion of human presence in the vastness of the wild. He plays for himself, and he plays for the ancestors who sat on this same rock 1,000 years ago, playing similar pipes of bone or elder wood. The melody is a thread connecting him to the deep history of the pastoral life. For 20 minutes he is lost in the music, his eyes half closed, his breath transforming into song, until the wind shifts and the moment passes. He lowers the pipe, wipes it carefully on his sleeve, and slips it back into his pocket, leaving the silence of the moor even deeper than before. As the sun begins its descent into the late afternoon, casting the eastern slopes into shadow, the shepherd turns his attention to the health of the flock. The heath is a rugged environment, and the terrain takes a toll on the animals. He notices a ewe limping slightly on her near foreleg. He signals the dog with a sharp ch-ch sound. The dog moves instantly, cutting the ewe out from the herd with surgical precision and driving her gently towards the shepherd. He catches her with a practiced move, hooking his leg around hers and tipping her onto her rump. She sits there, calm and submissive, in the shepherd's chair position. He examines the hoof. There is a small stone wedged between the cleaves, causing a bruise. He uses the point of his knife to pop the stone out. Click, and then reaches for his tar box. This horn container hanging from his belt holds the universal cure of the Dales, Stockholm tar. It is a thick, black, sticky substance derived from pine roots, smelling powerfully of smoke and antiseptic resin. He dips a stick into the tar and daubs a generous amount onto the hoof. The tar seals the wound, protects it from infection, and repels the flies. The smell of the tar is pungent, cutting through the fresh air, a scent that every shepherd associates with healing. He checks her fleece for ticks or signs of fly strike, finding none. He gives her a pat on the flank and releases her. She scrambles up and rejoins the flock, her limp already lessening. This veterinary care is constant and preventative. He is the doctor of the hill, his clinic a patch of grass, his pharmacy a pot of tar, his only goal the perfect physical maintenance of the living wealth entrusted to his care. The afternoon weather on the high moor is a fickle beast subject to sudden and dramatic changes. As the shepherd watches, the wind picks up, shifting from a gentle breeze to a stiff, blustery gust that whips his cloak around his legs. Above, the sky changes. A bank of large, white, cumulus clouds sails in from the west, driven by the Atlantic airstream. One of them, vast and dense, passes directly across the face of the sun. The effect is instantaneous. The brilliant golden light is extinguished, replaced by a cool grey shadow that races across the landscape like a living thing. The shepherd watches the shadow line approach. It swallows the distant peak, then the valley floor, and finally rushes up the slope to engulf him. The temperature drops 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. The vibrant purples and greens of the moor are muted to somber tones of slate and olive. It is a reminder of the fragility of the summer warmth. The shepherd pulls his hood up, fastening the toggle he carved the night before. He enjoys this interplay of light and dark. It makes the landscape feel dynamic and alive. He watches a hawk riding the turbulence of the thermal currents, hanging motionless in the air before diving into the shadow. Then, just as quickly as it arrived, the cloud passes. The trailing edge of the shadow races away to the east, and the sun bursts forth again, hitting the wet grass with a dazzling intensity. The colors flare back into existence brighter than before. The sheep, who had huddled slightly in the chill, spread out again. The world breathes in and out, a cycle of shade and light, cold and heat, played out on the massive canvas of the sky, with the shepherd as the sole, appreciative audience. The sun begins to dip lower in the western sky, transforming the harsh white light of the afternoon into the rich, syrupy gold of the early evening. The shepherd knows by the angle of the light on the distant pike that it is time to begin the gathering. This is the reverse of the morning's release, a process of contraction where the flock, now spread out over a square mile of heather, must be condensed back into a single unit for the journey home. He stands on a prominent rock and gives a long, undulating whistle. The dog, who has been trotting idly at his heel, instantly drops into a crouch, eyes locked on his master. With a subtle hand signal to the right, the shepherd sends him on the outrun. The dog departs like an arrow released from a bow, running wide and fast, a black streak against the brown moor. He does not run directly at the sheep, but casts a huge, pear-shaped arc around them, ensuring he does not spook them until he is positioned behind the furthest animal. The shepherd watches with critical admiration. It is a feat of geometry and instinct. Once the dog is in position, he begins to drive the stragglers inward, gently, using the pressure of his presence rather than his teeth. The sheep, sensing the change in the day and the authority of the dog, begin to coalesce. Small groups merge into larger bands, and the bands merge into a flock. They begin to flow down the rake, the ancient, worn path that cuts diagonally across the slope. The shepherd falls in behind them. The sound of the descent is a soft, rushing noise, like a sudden rainstorm, created by 4,000 hooves brushing through the bilberry bushes. The air is filled with the dust kicked up by their passage, a golden haze that catches the sunlight, turning the flock into a moving cloud of light. The day's grazing is done, the bellies are full, and the instinct for the safety of the foal begins to pull them down from the heights. Halfway down the slope, where the open moorland begins to give way to the scrubby birch and rowan trees of the valley edge, the shepherd encounters another solitary soul of the wilderness. Rising from a cleared patch of earth is a thin blue column of smoke. This is the camp of the charcoal burner. In the medieval economy, the charcoal burner is a vital but marginalized figure, living apart from the village in the deep woods, tending the slow-burning earth mounds that convert timber into the fuel needed for the smithies and the smelters. The shepherd pauses as he passes the clearing. The burner is there, a man covered in the black dust of his trade, looking like a shadow come to life. He is raking the soil over a smoldering mound, controlling the air intake with the precision of an alchemist. The smell here is intense, acrid, tarry, and dry, a sharp contrast to the clean, grassy scent of the sheep. The two men exchange a nod. There are no words spoken. The distance between their professions, one of the open sky and living wool, the other of the dark earth and dead wood, is too great for casual chatter. Yet there is a mutual respect. They are both outliers, men who live on the fringes of the settlement, guardians of the lonely places. The shepherd might leave a small wedge of cheese on a stump. The burner might leave a bundle of dry kindling. It is a silent trade, a recognition of their shared solitude. The flock flows past the smoking mound, the sheep giving it a wide berth, their instincts wary of the fire smell. The shepherd lifts his hand in a final salute and continues his descent, leaving the man of soot to his dark, alchemical vigil, moving back into the cleaner air of the open valley. They arrive back on the valley floor just as the gloaming begins, that soft twilight state where the color begins to drain from the world once more. The return to the lower altitude brings a sensory shift. The air is heavier here, more humid, and filled with the sounds of the settled lands. The wind has dropped completely, leaving a stillness that amplifies the sound of the river. The flock moves more eagerly now, sensing the proximity of the fold. They crowd along the bank of the stream, their hooves clattering on the river stones. The water, reflecting the darkening sky, looks like liquid lead. The flies and midges are active in the cooling air, dancing in clouds above the water, providing a feast for the swallows that swoop and dive in acrobatic loops. The shepherd walks at the rear of the procession, his staff tapping a steady rhythm on the ground. He feels the fatigue of the day settling into his legs, a good, heavy tiredness that speaks of miles walked and duty done. He watches the bats leaving their roosts in the old oak trees, flitting like erratic shadows against the pale sky. The village down the valley is just a collection of twinkling lights now, distant and removed. He does not envy the warmth of the cottages. He has become attuned to the rhythm of the migration. The daily journey up to the sky and back down to the earth is a pilgrimage he performs 365 times a year. As the stone walls of the sheepfold come into view, grey and welcoming in the dusk, he feels a sense of completion. The circle is closing. The sheep pour through the gap in the wall, a fluid stream of grey returning to the vessel of stone, ready to be held safe through another night. Once the sheep are secure within the fold, the shepherd performs the evening maintenance of the infrastructure. Before he closes the gate, he checks the water trough that sits just inside the wall. It is a hollowed-out stone log fed by a diversion from the stream. During the day, it has become clogged with fallen leaves and algae. He rolls up his woolen sleeve and reaches into the icy water, clearing the debris with his hand. He pulls out a plug of moss from the drain hole, letting the stagnant water rush out, then replaces it, allowing the trough to fill with fresh, clean water for the night. The sound of the water trickling into the stone basin is musical and clear. Next, he inspects the hurdle, the movable wooden gate. The lashings of hemp rope that hold it to the post are fraying slightly from the constant friction. He takes a spare length of cord from his satchel and reinforces the knot, tying it with a specific shepherd's hitch that will not slip but can be released quickly in an emergency. He drags the hurdle across the opening. It fits snugly into the gap, a solid barrier against the world. He tests it with his shoulder, ensuring it will hold against the weight of the flock pressing against it. Finally, he walks the perimeter of the wall one last time. He finds a loose coping stone that rocks when touched. He searches the ground for a small, wedge-shaped stone, a shim, and hammers it into the gap with the heel of his hand until the coping stone is rock solid. These small acts of repair are a dialogue with the future. He is ensuring that the fold remains a sanctuary not just for tonight, but for the years to come. The structure is secure. The water is clean. The gate is barred. The fortress is ready for the siege of the night. The darkness has now fully reclaimed the valley. The shepherd returns to his hut, the small wooden box on wheels that waits for him like a loyal dog. The ashes of his morning fire are cold and dead. He begins the ritual of the evening fire, repeating the motions of the dawn in reverse. He builds the pyramid of kindling, strikes the flint, and nurses the spark into a flame. The light flares up, pushing back the encroaching shadows, creating that familiar, intimate sphere of warmth. He sets his iron pot on a trivet over the flames to warm a simple broth of oats and herbs he prepared earlier. As the water begins to simmer, releasing a savory steam, he sits down on his watching stone. The dog eats first, as is the law of the hill. The shepherd tosses him a chunk of dried meat, which is gone in a single gulp, followed by a bowl of water. The dog then circles 3 times and settles onto his mat, letting out a long, shuddering sigh of contentment. The shepherd eats his broth slowly, holding the warm bowl in his hands. He looks up. The first star has appeared again, the same evening star that watched him 24 hours ago. The great bear is swinging low in the north. The cycle is seamless. The day has been a flurry of movement and light, but it was merely an interlude between the 2 great silences of the night. He feels the weight of the day lifting from his shoulders, replaced by the familiar vigilance of the watch. He pulls his cloak around him, leans back against the wood of the hut, and lets his eyes adjust to the dark. The world has narrowed down again to the fire, the sheep, and the stars. The shepherd is back at his post, the eternal sentry of the dales, ready to watch the wheel turn once more. As the fire settles into a steady, rhythmic burn, the shepherd's mind turns to the ancient mathematics of his trade. To the outsider, the flock is a chaotic, shifting mass of wool, impossible to quantify. But to the shepherd, it is a precise accounting ledger. He does not count in the decimal system of the merchants. He counts in the sheep score, a Celtic number system that predates the Roman invasion, surviving only here in the high hills. He murmurs the rhythm under his breath, a mantra that is as much a song as a calculation. Yan, tan, tethera, methera, pimp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He taps his fingers on his knee, marking the groups. Sethera, Lethera, Hovera, Dovera, Dick, 6 through 10. It is a base 20 system, designed for fingers and toes. When he reaches 20, jig it, he moves a small pebble from one pocket to another or makes a notch on his staff. This is the score. A shepherd's wealth is measured in how many scores he holds. This language is a secret code of the Dales, a linguistic fossil that connects him to the very first men who herded beasts on these slopes. The words feel round and heavy in the mouth, worn smooth by centuries of use like river stones. He practices the count even when the sheep are sleeping, running through the tally of the ewes, the hogs, and the gimmers. It is a mental exercise that imposes order on the world. He knows that if the count is short by even 1 digit, if a methera is missing from a jigit, the balance of the valley is broken and he must hunt until it is restored. The repetition of the old words in the quiet night is hypnotic, a lullaby of numbers that weaves the flock, the shepherd, and the history of the land into a single, unbreakable thread of logic. Deep in the pocket of his heavy woolen tunic, the shepherd carries a talisman that is older than the hills themselves. It is a shepherd's crown. To the eye, it is a heavy, heart-shaped stone marked with a 5-pointed star on its crown. We know it today as a fossilized sea urchin, an echinoid from the Cretaceous period, when this high moor was the floor of a tropical ocean. To the shepherd, it is a thunderstone, a magical object fallen from the sky. He found it washing out of the limestone bank of the stream after a heavy storm. He takes it out now, holding it in the firelight. The stone is cold and smooth, polished by the grease of the wool and the sweat of his hands. It is believed to bring luck to the flock and to protect the sheep from the elf shot, the sudden cramps or illnesses that strike without warning. He rubs his thumb over the star pattern, feeling the ridges of the fossil. It is a tangible connection to deep time. He does not know of geological eras, but he understands that the earth has memories. This stone was once a living thing, encased in rock, and now it serves as a guardian for other living things. He often places a row of these crowns along the top of the sheepfold wall, a line of silent sentries facing outwards. Holding the stone grounds him. It reminds him that the land is solid and enduring, that the life of a man or a sheep is fleeting, but the rock remains. He slips the fossil back into his pocket. Its weight against his hip is a comfort, a secret anchor that holds him steady against the superstitions of the dark, ensuring that the luck of the deep earth is on his side. The shepherd's life is defined by the transhumance, the seasonal migration that dictates his geography. In the deep winter, the flock dwells in the sheltered valleys, but as the summer heightens, they move to the shiling. This is the high summer pasture, the remote uplands where the grass is sweet and the air is thin. The hut he sits by now is a mobile version of the shealing life, but in the old days, there were permanent stone huts up here, small circular beehive structures built of turf and rock. He looks at the ruins of one such hut nearby, a ring of mossy stones in the heather. He imagines the summers of his ancestors. There was a time of separation from the village, a time when the young men and women lived entirely on the mountain. It was a time of cheese-making. The milk from the ewes was too precious to waste. It was turned into hard, salty cheeses and wheels of butter stored in the cool recesses of the stone huts. The shealing months are a time of cozy isolation. The world of the valley, the church bells, the market days, the harvest, feels like a different country. Up here, the society is reduced to the essential unit, the shepherd and the flock. He remembers the taste of the wig, a sour, refreshing drink made from the whey of the ewe's milk, drunk from a wooden cup while sitting on this very rock. The transhumance is the heartbeat of the pastoral year, a systole and diastole of movement that allows the valley grass to recover for hay, while the mountain grass feeds the flock. It is a perfect ecological balance, maintained by the walking feet of the shepherd, moving his charges in an eternal dance between the low and the high. Leaning against the wall of the hut is the shepherd's most iconic tool, the extension of his own arm. The crook. It is not a manufactured item bought from a peddler. It is a biography in wood. He made it himself, spotting the perfect hazel sapling growing in a coppice 3 years ago. He marked it, let it grow for another season, then cut it in the winter when the sap was down. The shank is straight and strong, seasoned in the rafters of his cottage until it was light as a feather but tough as iron. The head, the crook itself, is made from the horn of a ram. This was the most delicate part of the craft. He remembers the long evenings spent by the fire, boiling the horn in water until it became pliable, then clamping it into a wooden jig to force it into the perfect, generous curve. He polished it with pumice and oiled it with lanolin until it glowed like translucent amber. The crook is designed with specific geometry. The loop must be wide enough to catch a ewe by the neck, but narrow enough to catch a lamb by the leg. It is a tool of rescue, not punishment. The handle is carved with intricate knots and the initials of his father, for the stick is often passed down. When he walks, the crook acts as a third leg, helping him navigate the scree slopes. When he stands, it is a prop for his chin as he scans the horizon. It is a weapon against a fox and a probe to test the depth of a snowdrift. He picks it up now, checking the binding where the horn meets the wood. It is tight, the stick is worn from the fire. It is a masterpiece of functional art, a symbol of his office that commands respect from both the dog and the sheep. Although the shepherd sits alone in the silence of the hills, he is the first link in a chain that wraps around the world. The wool growing on the backs of his sleeping flock will not stay in the valley. In a few weeks, the pack-horse train will arrive. These are the convoys of sturdy, short-legged ponies that navigate the narrow paved tracks the jagger lanes that crisscross the moors. He can almost hear the phantom sound of their approach, the jingling of the bells on the lead horse's collar, designed to warn travelers on the misty paths. The leader of the train, the jagger, is a man of news and maps. He will load the massive wool sacks, towering bales of fleece that weigh as much as a man, onto the ponies' backs. The wool will leave the silence of the dales and enter the noise of history. It will travel to the great wool churches of East Anglia, to the weaving guilds of Flanders, and perhaps even to the trading houses of the Medici. The shepherd imagines his wool becoming a scarlet cloak for a cardinal in Rome, or a warm tunic for a merchant in Hamburg. He is the primary producer, the guardian of the raw material. This connection gives his lonely labor a global significance. He is not just watching sheep, he is fueling the economy of Christendom. He looks at the sleeping flock with a renewed sense of worth. They are walking gold mines. The silent, grassy conversion of sunlight into fiber that happens on this hill is the engine that builds the stone bridges, the high towers, and the stained glass windows of the distant cities. He is the quiet, hidden root of the great tree of commerce. Yet, the high moor cares little for the commerce of men or the destination of the fleece. It is governed by its own volatile and ancient laws. As the night deepens, the clarity of the stars is suddenly veiled by a phenomenon endemic to these uplands. It does not fall from the sky like rain, but rises from the cooling earth and rolls down from the peaks like a silent, slow-motion avalanche. In the local dialect, it is known as the ha or the clag. The shepherd watches it approach, a solid wall of white opacity that swallows the landscape whole. One moment the valley is a bowl of shadows, the next it is erased. The mist reaches the sheepfold, flowing over the stone walls and filling the enclosure with a damp, swirling vapor. The effect is one of immediate sensory deprivation. The horizon, the fire, which was a bright beacon, is reduced to a diffuse glowing halo of orange light, struggling to penetrate the white soup. The soundscape changes instantly. The acoustic clarity of the night is dampened, muffled, as if the world has been wrapped in heavy felt. The bleating of the sheep sounds distant and disembodied, even though they are only yards away. The air turns wet and cold, tiny droplets of moisture clinging to the shepherd's eyelashes and beading on the wool of his cloak. This is the blind hour. It is a time of danger, for in the mist, a sheep can wander into a bog, or a predator can approach unseen. The shepherd stands up, his hand tightening on his staff. He is no longer the master of a visual domain. He is a sailor adrift in a white ocean, relying entirely on his hearing and the superior senses of the dog at his side to navigate the formless void. In this whiteout, the partnership between man and dog shifts its balance. The shepherd, blinded by the fog, defers to the animal. The dog stands rigid at the edge of the firelight, his nose twitching rapidly, analyzing the damp air. The moisture in the atmosphere actually amplifies the scent molecules, creating a rich olfactory map of the surroundings that the human mind can barely comprehend. The dog can smell the wet wool of the flock, the ozone of the mist, the peat of the soil, and the faint musky trail of a fox passing half a mile away. The shepherd watches the dog's hackles and the orientation of his ears. If the dog relaxes, the shepherd relaxes. If the dog growls low in his throat, the shepherd prepares his sling. They move together around the perimeter of the fold, two ghosts passing through the cloud. The shepherd reaches out to touch the stone wall, needing the physical reassurance of the boundary. The stones are slick with condensation, weeping silent tears into the moss. Inside the fold, the sheep have huddled tighter together, their instinct for flocking triggered by the lack of visibility. They are a single, breathing organism of grey wool, their collective body heat creating a warm, humid pocket in the center of the mist. The shepherd speaks to them constantly as he walks, his voice low and rhythmic. Steady there, steady. In the fog, his voice is their anchor. It tells them that the guardian is still present, that the white nothingness has not swallowed them up. He is the lighthouse keeper, his voice the beam that cuts through the fog, holding the flock in place with the gravity of his presence. The dampness eventually drives the shepherd to seek the shelter of his hut. He climbs the wooden steps and closes the door behind him, shutting out the swirling white world. The interior of the hut feels smaller and more intimate than before, a dry wooden capsule floating in the mist. The silence here is profound, broken only by the soft drip, drip, drip of condensation falling from the eaves onto the grass below. He lights a tallow candle, setting it in a small lantern with horn windows. The yellow light is soft and steady, illuminating the grain of the oak walls and the simple tools hanging on their pegs. He sits on his bunk, listening to the weather. The mist presses against the thin wooden walls, a physical weight. He feels a profound sense of cozy containment. The world has shrunk to a box 6 feet by 4, yet he has everything he needs. He takes a piece of dried bilberry cake from his satchel and shares it with the dog, who is curled up on the dry floorboards, smelling of wet fur. The air in the hut is scented with the dried herbs stuffed into the mattress, lady's bed straw, meadow sweet, and wild thyme. Released by the pressure of his body, these scents are the perfumes of the summer meadow, preserved for the dark watch. He leans back, staring at the candle flame. The isolation is absolute. There is no village, no market, no king. There is only the shepherd, the dog, and the wooden shell that protects them from the weeping sky. It is a moment of deep existential peace, a suspension of time where the only reality is the dry warmth of the shelter and the steady beating of his own heart. Sometime in the hours before dawn, a wind rises from the north, a cold, scouring broom that sweeps the valley floor. The shepherd hears it first as a low moan in the chimney of the hut, then as a rattling of the wheels. He opens the door and steps out. The transformation is miraculous. The mist has been torn to shreds, ragged wisps of white fleeing down the valley like defeated ghosts. In its wake, the air has been scrubbed clean. It is crystalline, sharp, and incredibly transparent. The sky has been unveiled, and the stars return with a brilliance that hurts the eyes. Milky Way is no longer just a smudge, but a complex three-dimensional river of light, with dark pools of emptiness visible between the star clusters. The ground is wet, soaking the moonlight. Every blade of grass, every spiderweb, every stone is coated in water droplets that act as tiny lenses, reflecting the starlight until the entire moor seems to be encrusted with jewels. The smell is intoxicating, the scent of wet earth, crushed fern, and cold stone, purified by the moisture. The shepherd takes a deep breath, the cold air rushing into his lungs like water. The oppression of the blind hour is gone. He can see the distant ridges, sharp and black against the sky. He can see the sheep, their fleeces sparkling with dew, sleeping peacefully in the fold. The world feels new, washed, and reset. It is a moment of high clarity, where the physical landscape seems to vibrate with a silent, cold energy, stripped of all fuzziness and ambiguity, revealing the hard, beautiful bones of the earth. As the final act of the night's drama, the moon rises late over the eastern pike. It is a waning gibbous moon, not a full circle, but a heavy, lopsided shape of glowing silver. It climbs slowly, detaching itself from the horizon to hang in the ink-black sky. The light it casts is different from the sun. It is a cool, monochromatic illumination that turns the world into a photograph of silver and shadow. The limestone rocks of the dales, which are grey by day, turn a ghostly, luminous white under the moon, glowing as if lit from within. The sheepfold looks like a ring of bone. The shepherd watches his own shadow stretch out across the wet grass, a long, dark giant mimicking his movements. The moon is the shepherd's lantern, providing enough light to check the flock without the need for a fire. He walks among the sleeping animals, the moonlight turning their backs into a sea of silver waves. He checks the gate, the knot in the rope, the water trough, Everything is illuminated in this strange, silent spectral light. He feels a sense of awe at the beauty of the nocturnal world, a beauty that the villagers sleeping in their shuttered cottages never see. This is his secret kingdom. The cozy struggle of the night watch is rewarded by these moments of transcendent visual poetry. He sits back on his stone, bathed in the silver light, watching the moon track its high, lonely path across the stars, a silent companion that watches the watcher, uniting the solitary figure on the hill with the endless rhythmic cycles of the cosmos. The moon has now passed its zenith, beginning its slow, downward arc toward the western ridges. The quality of the light shifts subtly as the angle changes, the silver illumination lengthening the shadows of the dry stone walls until they stretch across the valley floor like dark, parallel bars of a cage. The shepherd remains on his stone seat, his posture unchanged, a monument to stillness. This is the deep watch, the stretch of time where the initial alertness of the evening and the anticipation of the morning both fade away, leaving only a state of pure, suspended existence. His mind has stopped racing. He is no longer thinking of the market prices or the winter repairs. He has entered a meditative state known to all who work the night shifts of the world, a trance-like drift where the boundary between the thinker and the environment dissolves. He watches the constellation of Cassiopeia, the great W of stars rotating slowly around the pole star. He is witnessing the mechanics of the universe in real time. The silence is so profound that he can hear the blood pumping in his own ears, a rhythmic whoosh, whoosh, that mimics the sound of the wind. The fire has burned down to a pile of white ash, guarding a core of red heat that pulses faintly with every breath of air. The dog is deep in a dream, his paws twitching as he chases phantom rabbits across a mined meadow. In this profound quiet, the shepherd feels a sense of expansion. He is not lonely, he is solitary, which is a different thing entirely. To be lonely is to lack company, to be solitary is to be whole in oneself. He feels the weight of the hills supporting him, the cold air filling him, and the starlight washing over him. He is the consciousness of the valley, the single point of awareness that validates the existence of the night. As the night begins to lean heavily toward the morning, the atmosphere undergoes a final distinct transformation. This is the hour of the great hush. It is said by the dalesmen that just before the dawn, the wind drops completely, the water in the stream runs quieter, and even the earth itself seems to hold its breath. The temperature reaches its absolute minimum, the stone cold of the pre-dawn. The frost that coated the grass earlier now thickens, forming complex fern-like crystalline structures on the wool of the shepherd's cloak and the handle of his crook. The air is brittle, tasting of iron and ice. The shepherd pulls his arms inside his cloak, hugging his chest to preserve the core warmth. He does not fight the cold. He accepts it as the price of the morning. He knows that this intense chill is the final darkness before the light. He looks down at the flock. They are motionless, a sea of grey boulders in the moonlight. Their breathing has synchronized, a slow, collective inhalation and exhalation that creates a low, resonant hum in the air. It is a sound of immense comfort, the sound of life enduring. The shepherd feels a deep affection for these creatures. They are his charges, his livelihood, and his family. He knows that down in the village, the people are sleeping under heavy blankets, oblivious to the majesty of this frozen moment. He feels a secret pride in his hardship. He is the one who sees the world when it is stripped of all pretense, when it is naked and cold and beautiful. He is the guardian of the hush, waiting with the patience of a saint for the first crack in the armor of the night. The first sign of the breaking of the siege is not visual but auditory. From the depths of the hawthorn hedge that runs along the lower boundary of the pasture, a single bird begins to sing. It is a male blackbird, staking his claim to the coming day. The song is tentative at first, a few fluted notes testing the air, Then it gains confidence, becoming a rich, melodic warble that cascades through the silence. It is the first voice. Within moments he is joined by a thrush, then a robin, then the high, trilling song of a wren. The dawn chorus swells, a wave of sound that travels up the valley floor, waking the world. As the music rises, the light begins to change. The ink black of the eastern sky softens, turning to a deep, bruised purple, then to the color of a dove's wing. The stars, which have stood sentinel for so long, begin to fade, retreating into the deepening blue. The moon, now low in the west, looks pale and ghostly, a coin of white paper pasted against the sky. The shepherd stands up, his joints cracking, and stretches his arms wide. He takes a deep breath of the new air. It smells different than the night air. It smells of ozone, of wet grass, and of opening. The day is rushing in. The monochromatic world of the moonlight begins to regain its color. The grass turns from gray to a muted green. The heather reclaims its purple. The stone walls return to their warm limestone beige. The world is being painted back into existence, layer by layer, by the returning light. The shepherd kicks the ash of his fire, scattering the last of the heat. The time for the artificial sun is over. The real one is at the threshold. And then the sun returns. It crests the horizon not as a tentative glow, but as a conquering king. The rim of the solar disk burns through the morning mist, sending long, horizontal shafts of golden light racing across the dew-soaked turf. The light hits the shepherd's face, and he closes his eyes, letting the warmth soak into his skin. It is a moment of pure, physical ecstasy. The cold of the night evaporates instantly, replaced by a gentle, radiating heat. The frost on the grass sparkles with a blinding intensity, millions of tiny prisms refracting the light into rainbows before melting into water. The sheep wake up. The flock rises as one, shaking the dew from their fleeces, their bleating filling the air with the busy sound of the morning. The dog yawns, stretches, and looks at the shepherd with bright, eager eyes. The long watch is done. The terror of the dark, the biting cold, the silence, it has all been swept away by the inevitable turning of the earth. The shepherd feels a profound sense of continuity. He has survived another night. The flock is safe. The walls held. The valley is intact. He looks out over the landscape, which is now bathed in the fresh, clean light of the new day. It is a world of infinite possibility. The shadows are long and crisp, pointing west, leading the way for the day's grazing. He feels a deep, quiet joy, not the exuberant joy of a festival, but the solid, grounding joy of a duty discharged and a cycle completed. The sun is up. The world is awake. The shepherd has brought them through. Far below, in the bowl of the valley, the village is waking up. The shepherd can see the first thin pillars of wood smoke rising from the chimneys of the thatched cottages, climbing straight up into the still air like prayers. He imagines the scenes playing out down there, the women unbarring the doors, the men pulling on their boots, the children stirring in the straw. They are waking to a world that he has kept safe for them. They do not know of the cold wind at 3 a.m. They do not know of the owl's cry or the frost on the stone. They only know that their wool is safe, their mutton is secure, and their economy is intact. The shepherd is the silent partner in their lives, the invisible foundation upon which their comfort rests. He sees a small figure walking up the track from the village, a young boy carrying a satchel. It is his son, coming to relieve him, bringing fresh bread and a flask of ale. The shift is ending. The shepherd leans on his crook, watching the boy climb the hill. He feels the weariness now, a heavy, warm weight in his legs and back. It is a good tiredness, the feeling of a body used for its intended purpose. He looks at the sun, now fully detached from the horizon, a yellow coin in the blue sky. The wheel has turned full circle. The night is a memory. The day is a fact. He waits for the boy, ready to hand over the watch, ready to descend into the valley, ready to sleep in the warmth of the day, while the world continues its eternal, rhythmic dance under the watchful eye of the sun. The meeting on the hillside is a ritual of few words, a handover of responsibility that has been enacted in this valley for 1,000 years. The boy reaches the crest, his face flushed from the climb, his breath puffing in the cool morning air. He carries a fresh satchel of food and a skin of water for the day watch. The shepherd nods to his son, a greeting of equals in the trade. There is no need for long speeches. The father points with his crook to the far. The coping stone is fixed, he says, his voice gravelly with the morning, and the ewe with the black face is favoring her left foreleg. Keep an eye on her. The boy nods, absorbing the information. He takes the seat on the watching stone, the stone that still holds the warmth of his father's body. The transfer of authority is instant. The flock, sensing the change, barely lifts its head. The guardian has changed face, but the function remains. The shepherd whistles to his dog. The animal looks from the boy back to the man, torn for a moment before the shepherd signals him to stay. Watch him, the shepherd commands softly. The dog settles back down at the boy's feet. The apprenticeship includes the dog. The boy must learn to command, and the dog must learn to obey a new voice. The shepherd adjusts his cloak, feeling a sudden lightness. The weight of the valley, the safety of the 1,000 souls in the fold, has been lifted from his shoulders and placed onto the younger, stronger back. He turns away, leaving the circle of the camp, his boots finding the downward path. He does not look back. To look back is to doubt, and there is no room for doubt on the hill. The watch is past. The line is held. The descent into the valley is a journey through the strata of the morning. As the shepherd drops in altitude, he moves from the sharp crystalline clarity of the high moor into the softer, hazier atmosphere of the inhabited lands. The air grows denser and warmer with every step, rich with the smells of damp earth, cow parsley, and the smoke of wood fires. The silence of the peaks is replaced by the rising hum of the day. He hears the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer, clang, 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 echoing against the valley walls. He hears the lowing of cattle being driven to the lower meadows. He passes the charcoal burner's camp, now silent, the man sleeping off his own night shift. The path changes from the springy turf of the sheep track to the hard-packed mud of the cart road. The shepherd walks with a loose, easy gait, letting gravity do the work, his staff clicking rhythmically on the stones. He feels a strange sense of dislocation. He is a creature of the night returning to the world of the day. He feels like a traveler returning from a foreign country or a sailor stepping onto land after a long voyage. The people he passes, a woman gathering sticks, a carter leading a horse, nod to him with respect. They know where he has been. They see the frost still clinging to the hem of his cloak and the tired set of his eyes. He is the night watchman returning from the frontier, bringing the silent news that the borders are secure. He walks through the tunnel of hazel trees that arches over the lane, the leaves dappled with sunlight, welcoming him back to the canopy of civilization. He arrives at the edge of the village. The settlement is fully awake now. A hive of geese hiss and waddle across the village green, children run with hoops, and the mill wheel churns the river water with a steady roar. The shepherd walks through this sensory chaos with the calm detachment of the observer. He passes the church, crossing himself instinctively as he passes the lich gate. He smells the baking bread from the communal oven, a scent that triggers a sudden, sharp hunger in his belly. He reaches his own cottage, a modest structure of wattle and daub, with a low thatched roof that sits near the edge of the green. The door is open to the morning sun. He ducks his head to enter, crossing the threshold from the public world into the private sanctuary. The interior is dark and warm, smelling of pottage and dried herbs. His wife is at the hearth stirring the iron pot. She turns as he enters, her face softening into a smile. She does not ask if the night was hard, She sees it in his posture. She simply points to the wooden stool by the fire and fetches a bowl. This domestic space, with its swept floor and organized shelves, feels incredibly small and enclosed after the vastness of the moor, but it also feels safe. It is the reward. He leans his staff against the wall by the door, the wood polished and smooth. He unclasps his heavy cloak, the wool heavy with the moisture of the mist, and hangs it on a peg. The weight falls away. He is no longer the guardian. He is a man, a husband, a father, returned to the hearth he protects. He sits heavily on the three-legged stool, extending his legs toward the fire. The heat of the hearth is different from the heat of the sun. It is focused and intense, penetrating the leather of his boots to warm his tired feet. He begins the slow process of unlacing them. His fingers, stiff from the cold night, fumble slightly with the leather thongs. He pulls the boots off, one by one, with a groan of relief, setting them by the fire to dry. He peels off his thick woolen stockings, wiggling his toes in the warmth. The physical release is profound. The tension that he has held in his body for 12 hours, the readiness to spring, the brace against the wind, begins to dissolve. His wife places a wooden bowl in his hands. It is filled with a thick porridge of oats and peas, sweetened with a little honey. He eats slowly, the spoon scraping against the wood. The food is hot and filling, spreading a heavy narcotic warmth through his stomach. He does not speak much. The transition from the language of the wind and the sheep to the language of men takes time. He listens to the quiet domestic sounds, the crackle of the wood, the sweep of the broom, the hum of his wife's spinning wheel. These are the sounds of peace. He has spent the night ensuring that these sounds can continue uninterrupted. He wipes the bowl clean with a piece of bread and sets it down. His eyelids are heavy now, weighted with lead. The adrenaline of the sunrise has faded, leaving behind a deep, overwhelming desire for rest. The day is for others. The night was his, and he has spent it all. He moves to the sleeping nook at the back of the cottage. It is a box bed, filled with fresh straw and covered with heavy woolen blankets. It is dark here, shielded from the bright morning sun by a heavy curtain. He lies down, sinking into the rustling softness of the mattress. He pulls the blanket up to his chin. The wool smells of lavender and wood smoke. He closes his eyes. Immediately, the images of the night begin to replay in his mind. The silver moon on the stone wall, the glowing eyes of the sheep, the orange sparks of the fire. But they are distant now, fading like a dream. He feels the solid earth beneath him, not the cold, hard ground of the hill, but the protected floor of his home. He listens to the distant sounds of the village, the mill, the geese, the voices, but they blur into a gentle, rhythmic lullaby. He lets go of the count. Yan, Tan, Tethera. The numbers drift away. He lets go of the vigilance. The wolf is far away. The wall is strong. The boy is on the watch. He takes a deep, slow breath, exhaling the last of the night's cold. His breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the sleeping flock he left behind. The guardian of the dark surrenders to the light. He drifts down deeper and deeper, past the worry, past the cold, into the warm, silent, dreamless pasture of sleep. While the shepherd sleeps in the dim quiet of his cottage, the world he helps to sustain continues to turn in the bright sunshine. It is easy to overlook this figure, hidden as he is in the folds of the hills and the shadows of the night. History is often written by those who hold the pen, not the crook. We read of the kings who wore the velvet, not the men who guarded the wool. Yet, without the shepherd, the foundation of the medieval world would crumble. He is the silent engine of the economy, the protector of the primary resource. But his contribution goes deeper than commerce. He is the embodiment of the social contract of safety. In a world that is often dark, dangerous, and uncertain, the shepherd represents the vigil. He is the promise that someone is awake while the others sleep. He is the living wall between the village and the wild. This role requires a specific kind of courage, not the frantic, adrenaline-fueled courage of the battlefield, but the slow, enduring, patient courage of the watchman. It is the courage to be alone, to be cold, and to be steadfast when no one is watching. As he rests now, his body heavy with the fatigue of duty, he is more than just a tired laborer. He is a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit, a testament to our ability to carve out a space of order and safety. Let your mind rise once more, drifting up from the thatched roof of the cottage, up into the clear blue air of the midday. Look down at the valley one last time. See the village, bustling with the small, important business of life. See the smoke rising, the mill turning, the children playing. Then look higher, up the green slopes, past the stone walls, to the high ridge. See the tiny white specks of the flock, grazing peacefully under the sun. See the small figure of the boy, sitting on the rock, his dog at his feet, maintaining the line. The cycle is unbroken. The watch is changed, but the vigilance remains. It is a continuous rhythmic exchange of energy, a baton passed from father to son, from night to day, from generation to generation. The sun climbs high, warming the heather, drying the dew, and bleaching the stones. The wind blows softly from the west, carrying the scent of the drying hay. The earth feels solid, ancient, and reliable. It is a landscape of immense age, worn smooth by the weather and the feet of the shepherds. It does not hurry, it does not worry. It simply exists, turning slowly in the light, holding the sheep and the people in its rocky embrace. This is the timeline of the hills, a time measured not in hours, but in seasons, in lifetimes, in the slow erosion of the stone. As we prepare to leave this valley, take a moment to internalize the feeling of the shepherd's watch. In your own life, you often carry the burden of the watchman. You worry about the future. You guard your resources. You protect your loved ones. You stand on the walls of your own life, scanning the horizon for threats. But now, in this sanctuary of sleep, you can lay down the staff. You can extinguish the fire. The watch is done. You have done your duty. You have checked the gate. You have counted the flock. And you have mended the wall. There is nothing left to do. You can hand over the vigilance to the night. Just as the shepherd surrendered his care to the boy and the sun, you can surrender your cares to the quiet and the dark. You are safe. The walls of your home are strong. The world will continue to turn without. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to step down from the stone and enter the warm, dark cottage of sleep. Feel the relief of that release. The heavy, sweet sensation of letting go. You are no longer the guardian. You are the guarded. You are held in the safety of the night, protected by the rhythms of the earth, watching over you as you sleep. The images of the dales begin to fade now. The purple of the heather, the grey of the limestone, the gold of the sun, they all soften and blur, dissolving into a gentle, comforting mist. The sound of the wind dies away. The bleating of the sheep becomes a faint, distant echo, then silence. You are floating in the quiet, dark space between the stories. Your breathing is slow and steady, a deep, rhythmic rise and fall that matches the breathing of the sleeping shepherd. In and out, in and out. Your body is heavy, sinking deeper into the mattress, supported and held. Your hands are open, empty of tools, empty of tension. Your eyes are closed, shutting out the light. The cozy struggle is over. The cozy rest has begun. There is no cold here, no frost, no hard ground. There is only warmth, softness, and peace. You are drifting on a calm, dark river, moving slowly towards the ocean of dreams. Let the current take you. There is no need to steer. There is no need to watch. The stars are above you, the earth is beneath you, and the night is all around you. And so, our chronicle of the shepherd's watch draws to its close. The wheel has turned full circle. The fire is out, the gate is barred, and the valley is at peace. The shepherd sleeps, the flock grazes, and the earth spins on in silence. We leave them there, suspended in the amber of history, a timeless image of care and endurance. But the peace they found is yours to keep. Carry the stillness of the high moor into your sleep. Carry the warmth of the hearth into your dreams. The story is finished, but the rest remains. You have traveled far, you have watched long, and now you have earned this deep, restorative slumber. The night is yours. The darkness is a blanket, not a wrap it around you and sleep. Sleep now, safe in the knowledge that the watch is kept, the dawn will come, and all is well. Good night.